Last night I couldn't sleep, but when I did, I could hear bombs in my dreams. Nightmare situation. How could they be so evil, making martyrs out of children and innocent people? We expect the bombs, not knowing where next. Huddle in the corner of my room, trying to protect my little brother. The building shakes like it's possessed, but no stronger than the will of the oppressed. Living the times trying to put the Palestinian mind. What's hiding in the clouds hanging over my head? My dad risks his life outside to buy bread. The fourth war, my 12th year with this stage of bomb, though I haven't been spared. There's nothing I can do in this case to stay safe and brave. Even though this house could be my grave, I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. Yes, life under an occupation. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. Yes, life under an occupation. Mothers mourn, fighting with grief. White sheets cover bodies that lie on the streets. Buildings turn to ash, but my mind is made of steel. So it doesn't take much for me to heal. We'll lose the will to live or lose our minds. My auntie lost her home, so she lost her life, but she is still alive, but traumatized by the bombs that flew in and dropped that night. My sister couldn't sleep, tried to stop her cries. I said it was fireworks, I was telling her lies. Where's the compassion? This is heartless. It's like they want us all living in darkness. Cutting off water and electricity for hours. They're knocking power, but that's not knocking the power that I have in my pen. When I'm writing, I'm unstoppable. The microphone is the only escape possible. Cause that's the way that I can speak my mind. I wonder how does the fighter pilot sleep at night? Knowing he can turn the city upside down all of a sudden, slaughtering families with the push of a button. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing.
All right, all right. Greetings, everyone. I hope you all are safe and healthy and well. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Our Ancestors' Voices. We are so honored to have you here today, and we are very grateful. And of course, we start off as we always do by acknowledging our comrades, our indigenous ancestors, those who are with us, those who have also transitioned and left this earth. We acknowledge that this land that we sit on currently is yours. We are thankful that you are here with us. We are thankful that you have allowed us to use your resources. As always, we acknowledge that the indigenous people's land is not just limited to the Americas, but we also need to think about how indigenous people's land starts as high up as Canada all the way down to the lands of Chile. And so we thank you for that. We want to make sure that we have everything we can to ensure that we are acknowledging that. So we thank you all. And again, I want to give shout outs to our Indigenous comrades. I was trying to create a playlist, if you will, that honored all of our different comrades, especially because we're still in the spirit of African Liberation Day, which was celebrated earlier this week, but continues to be celebrated. The virtual broadcast was earlier this week. However, there are numerous in-person events that are taking place this weekend as well as the following weeks to come. And so in the spirit of ALD, we want to acknowledge any colonized person and the struggles that they have gone through for them to be in the positions they're in today. And we want to let them know in solidarity that we are with them. And so if you came in early, then you heard the young rapper Muhammad Abdul, the Palestinian rapper, playing on the playlist. And, you know, we also tried to acknowledge our indigenous comrades as well by pulling some different music to represent their situation and their struggle as well. So the struggle continues, Alutua continue, and we are going to continue on that note by continuing to honor our comrades, those that are with us, as well as those that have passed on, as we do the best we can to acknowledge and honor them all, not only with today's broadcast, but all broadcasts from now and on, and those that have passed as well. So if you are just now joining us, or if you are a returning member, we thank you so much for being with us today. We're grateful to have you. I usually would co-host this seminar as a part of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which is a Pan-Africanist organization. We call ourselves Pan-Africanists because we understand that we cannot center the issues that African people, so anyone who descends from the continent of Africa, whether you call yourself Black, African American, Afro-Cuban, Afro this, Afro that, Black, Asian, whatever the term is that colonialism has confused you with, that means that you are African. If you are in Jamaica or Haiti and you descend from Africa, we're talking about you. And we're going to talk in just a little bit about how no matter where you were born, if you have roots that are African, then you are African. Our comrade Kwame Nkrumah states very eloquently, any African anywhere that descends from the continent of Africa belongs to the African nation. And so we are a Pan-Africanist organization, the AAPRP, because we understand that the conditions that are affecting Africans everywhere are stem rooted in what's happening to Africa. So because colonizers are in Africa today, stealing resources, manipulating resources and economic systems, abusing politicians, and capitalist regimes are taking over, making it very, very difficult for people to earn livable wages everywhere, not just in the US, not just in Canada, not just in parts of South America, but anywhere where Africans are, we understand that those problems are not just respective to that location. They start always because of what's happening to the African nation. And so the All African People's Revolutionary Party believes that we are one socialist organization, and we believe that Africa will become a one unified socialist Africa. We believe in socialism, and more importantly, we believe that socialism, will help us uncover some of the challenges that we've been facing that will allow us to get to a greater part where we can have more control over our own resources as African people. There's no reason why we shouldn't be determining how the cobalt or the coltan or the rubber or the diamonds or the gold, the cacao, there's no reason why we should not be determining how those resources are used, distributed, developed, but yet we don't have the control to do that. You, if you identify as an African person, do not have the control. I, who identifies as an African person, no one is emailing me or calling me, asking me. So we just grew this new tree load of cacao, and we wanted to know how you wanted to use that resource moving forward. I have no jurisdiction, no determination, and more importantly, no one gives a darn about how I would like those resources to be used. And it's coming from my continent. So we have a lot of work to do if Africans are to obtain ownership of land, which means then they can have control on how the resources that come from that land are being used. And so we want to continue with that belief of uprooting not only African people, but also the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because with the teachings of our founders, such as Kwame Nkrumah, and you can see the book on the right, one of the many books that he published, Revolutionary Warfare, he laid out how to start an organization. And he also laid out that starting that organization would allow us to have the foundation where we would be under the impression that starting an organization such as the All African People's Revolutionary Party would give us the tools to understand, first and foremost, we need to establish some type of political education. None of us have the knowledge that we need to deconstruct colonialism and to take back our land. But if we all were to take some time to increase our political education, we'd be at more of a stance to be able to navigate that space a little bit better. Kwame Nkrumah knew this. He knew that we needed to organize how we would navigate military, economic, social, health, and even educational situations. He knew that we would need to figure all of that out, especially because we're not interested in any colonizers remaining on our homeland. We want them all to get out and go, which means we're going to have to start from scratch in terms of establishing health situations, education, politics. What does it mean to have economics that are centered on one unified socialist Africa, which means the same economic system is practiced across the whole continent, not just country by country? We understand that each of us are different in our own ways, so we're not mandating that we all need to share one same practice of everything, because we understand the difference of our people. But by the same token, we need to be unified because we've spent 400, 500, 600 plus years of being divided. And that divide has also led to a class divide, which we do not associate with. The whole purpose of socialism is to eradicate class division, because it starts to help people understand that we shouldn't really be separating ourselves from one another based on how much income we make, or by how fancy our car is, or how much money we have compared to somebody else who has job insecurity. Instead, we should be thinking about how we all have skills. Some of us are really good at computer analytics. Some of us are really good at educating children. Some of us are really good at cutting hair and styling hair. Some of us are really good at working on cars. Some of us are really good at building houses. Some of us are really good at talking and giving presentations and speeches. We all have things that we are passionate and skilled at. And so the process of socialism allows us to all identify, A, what those skills are, and B, how can we use those skills to improve the situations for humanity? That is socialism. And once you get to a point where you've established who can do what and how we all can contribute, because sanitation workers are just as important as teachers, who are just as important as barbers, who are just as important as construction workers. Once we get to that point of understanding that and letting go of this idea that I'm a doctor, so I'm better than you because you are a sanitation worker, then we can start to look at communism, which is the next step of socialism. And you shouldn't be confused. You should definitely increase your political education and do your homework, because if you allow media, imperialism, and capitalism mainstream to lie to you, they will tell you that communism is a horrible system that does not work. And that's really fascinating to me to put that out there, because that rhetoric is simply not true. We know that it's not true as the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because communism has never, ever existed anywhere in the world. It has never been done. So how can something that's never existed be not working? How do you measure that? How do you measure that? How do you know that it's not working? It's never been a trial. You've never seen it. And we know that it's never existed because classism division still exists. And as I just said, if classism division is eradicated, then that means we are truly in a communist state, because that means no one is divided by the type of class that they associate with. And as I just pointed out, we still very much has class division. You still have class division even in socialist environments, which is why socialism is a step before communism. So I could talk about this all day long, but obviously you all are here because you'd like to hear about this Pan-African Women's Day seminar. So I want to continue on and say that because I am a work study member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, work study is one of our subdivisions and a great critical part that makes the party what it is. I am humbled to be able to do this seminar with you. And I usually have my dad that I do with, but he is unavailable tonight. So I appreciate you all being patient with me and showing up just the same so that we can navigate through this. I also want to point out that my dad has been organizing with the party so much longer than I have. But I think I just celebrated my 3rd year in February of being a work study member. So I'm moving right along, and one day I'll be able to advance to pre-cadre and then cadre as the levels get higher and higher. So it's a great opportunity to be here. And I hope that if you are not a part of an organization that is working for justice, then you seriously consider joining in organization. If you identify as an African person, then the All African People's Revolutionary Party is the organization for you. If you are not in an organization and you don't want to join the AAPRP, then maybe you should look at some other organizations that are still doing the work where you can still be active and where you can still contribute. Or maybe perhaps you should start your own organization. And one of the comrades that I'm going to be talking about tonight not only joined organizations that were working for justice, but also co-founded an organization. So I don't want you to say that it can't be done, because that's simply not true. And so on that note, we are going to jump in and talk about Pan-African Women's Day. And before we start in giving the background of PAWD, I also want to just thank everyone for their contributions for the African Liberation Day institution that we have been ranting and raving about. As I said, I was humbled to participate in the virtual broadcast last week. There are in-person events happening as we speak, and there will be some continuing into the next week. But for those that donated for our African Liberation Day broadcast, we are so thankful for you. We had several translators who were there and obviously needed to get paid. And so I'm so grateful that you all's proceeds were able to help contribute to that. We had people speaking in Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish. We even had French translators. And so again, just thank you all so much. Understand that some of our awardees were able to travel to other locations where events in person were taking place. We had pre-recorded solidarity statements from our comrades with the Cuban embassy. And so even though they weren't able to attend, they were able to send their pre-recording to us. And so just the ability to be able to get the recording uploaded, the technology costs, whether the Zoom webinar was working or not, being able to make sure that we had access to make sure that we had backup plans and our keynote speaker, honorariums that we wanted to give folks. Your money went to a really great event. And in some cases, we were able to even roll some of that money over into the in-person events that are still taking place. So we are taking a break this week, and we are not asking for donations because we really just want to take a moment to thank every single one of you who was able to contribute in that way. ALD to me has always been a success, but because you all set out and made a goal, we were able to meet that goal, and we were able to donate more than our goal. Our goal was $500 and we were able to donate more than that. So kudos to all of you. We thank you for that. So on that note, is Pan-African Women's Day. So we, of course, think about patriarchy. We think about toxic masculinity. We need to think about how revolutionizing ourselves and building revolution, social revolution, which is one of the components of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which basically just focuses on how we need to think about how social interactions with people, people who are oppressed within the African diaspora, but also on the African continent. So what does it mean to achieve freedom and be free of oppression from African people if certain African marginalized genders or women of African descent are still being targeted as they still are experiencing oppression? We can get rid of all the colonizers all day long, but if we still are practicing their practices, So if we're still promoting patriarchy, if we're still promoting homophobia, if we're still promoting sexism, then we might as well let them stay in, because their influence on us is still very great. And so thinking about how we achieve a one unified socialist Africa means we need to eradicate any reverence and any representative or resemblance, I should say, of any colonizer's impression on us. So that means we need to start from scratch and let go of systems of oppression, especially those that harm some of us, and if we're thinking about how we want to advance all of us. And so Pan-African Women's Day is an opportunity for us to think about that on a larger level. It's an opportunity for us to think about how we have a big responsibility to think about how the conditions from a social revolutionary standpoint that affect African women and African marginalized genders, how those institutions that are constructed to dehumanize people of African descent are still going to harm us in achieving our one unified socialist Africa goal. More importantly, it's going to harm us as a people, and it's going to build up that class divide that I just mentioned to you. Because whether you want to admit it or not, sexism promotes class division. We can talk all day about the pink tax. We can talk all day about how African women or African marginalized genders make less than African men. We could talk all day about how African people make less than European people. But if you really break that down, we even have patriarchy and sexism that's rooted in African people, where African people are literally pitted against one another because African men make more on the dollar than African women and African marginalized genders. And in some cases, African women or African marginalized genders are more experienced, they're more educated, and they're more qualified for the job, and they still make less money than the African man, or they may not even get hired at all. And so again, this class divide is really, really big. It's not just about racism. It's not just about white supremacy. You have to continue to think about class division. You have to, because it's everywhere and it's in everything that we do. And so then we're not going to be able to achieve socialism if we're still promoting class divide. We're simply not going to be able to achieve it. And so the Pan-African Women's Day was established in July of 1961 by the Democratic Party of Guinea, because they wanted to celebrate an all-African women's conference that had taken place in Dar es Salaam, then known as Tanganyika, and today we call it Tanzania. So in 1961, in July, the Democratic Party of Guinea had this women's conference, and they were celebrating what was going on. And one of the outcomes of the conference was people came together at this conference and said, yeah, we should celebrate this all African women's conference, but we should also consider how we can continue this celebration. We shouldn't just celebrate this one time each year at this all African women's conference. We should actually make a day to celebrate African women, Pan-African women around the world. And so an outcome of that conference was a Pan-African Women's Organization that was established in July of 1962, so the next year and the same month. And then from there, that organization was able to offer the Pan-African Women's Organization, which gave birth to the Pan-African Women's Day. And the very first celebration of that was in July of 1962. And so again, just thinking about the importance of why this organization was able to give birth to such an event, because they understood that we needed to tackle social revolution. Again, how do systems of oppression within our communities that we are promoting and perpetuating, how are those affecting all of us achieving our revolution? You cannot eradicate all the colonizers out of Africa if you're still supporting systems that dehumanize African women and African marginalized genders. So whether that's transphobia, whether it's homophobia, whether it's sexism, whether it's elitism, whether it's xenophobia, whatever it is, we must address it, because it is getting in our way to achieve one unified socialist Africa. Another way to think about that is, if we don't eradicate these systems and if we don't do something about this, we are not going to achieve what we want to achieve, because we're going to be stuck in a space where we're not going to have all the resources we need, because we're still dwelling in the past. And if you really break it down, what has that done for us? How has celebrating any of the systems that the European colonizer has taught us, how has that helped us with anything that we've had today? We still see African people getting shot down. We still have numerous African trans people who are kidnapped every single day, and we don't even know their names. We don't know their families. We don't know anything about them because they're not even relevant enough to make it on the news. We have African people who identify with the LGBTQ community, and they are under attack every single day because we live in a cis heteronormative society where that takes precedence over being homosexual, which is problematic. And as I just said, we also have social revolutionary issues where within our own communities, we think that we might be better than someone else because of the gender that we have assigned to us. And that's simply not okay if we are to advance forward as a people. If we think about Pan African Women's Day, it's been in existence for over 61 years, you all. 61 years. Pan African Women's Day has a reputation of resisting and fighting for the emancipation of women and non-male people or marginalized genders. And we can also think about how the All African People's Revolutionary Party honored Pan African Women's Day and used it as a vehicle to help us institutionalize how anti-patriarchy was the thing that we wanted to continue to fight, as well as the full participation of women and marginalized genders in terms of being in our society, taking leadership roles and positions, allowing other people to hear from them. We actually have really great policies and practices that I've seen on a party-wide broadcast, if you will. So when I say broadcast, I mean any particular seminar. If you are within the party, then you know I'm talking about if you've joined any of the seminars. So take the PE seminar, for example, or maybe you can take a program seminar. When we join these seminars, there are Africans from all over the world who are on these particular seminars because our organization is global, right? We're established in Africa, but we have chapters in Canada and parts of Europe. We have chapters in the Americas. We have chapters all over the world. And so we have Africans that are in these chapters all over the world. And so therefore they're joining from Europe, they're joining from Canada, they're joining from parts of the continent and all these different things. And so I say that to say this, we have practices on these seminars where, you know, as we're asking these discussion questions, because usually it's based on some type of reading that we all had access to, we're asking these discussion questions, and whoever's facilitating that particular section of the seminar will probably say at one point, okay, so we've heard from a lot of, you know, male identifying voices. Can we hear from some non-male voices? If you have not already spoke and you identify as a non-male person, can you take this opportunity to answer some of these questions? And then it goes into the ages sector as well. So maybe the person's facilitating will say, you know, I've heard from a lot of older cadre. Is it possible for some of the older folks to maybe take a step back and to mute themselves? And let's try to let some of the younger folks who are just starting with this party come up. They're just starting to be organizers with work study, or maybe they're pre-cadre. Maybe we can give them a chance to try to answer as well. And so again, just sharing the opportunity for us all to be aware that we're all contributing. Second of all, we can't just have the same voices answering. We need new informative ideas, and we need to give rest to the older folks, as well as younger folks need to learn. So we have to step in so that we can get that. And then I would say, even important beyond that, we have to deconstruct sexism and patriarchy, which are systems that literally give value and assign importance to male identifying people and subtract that same value and importance from non-male people, which is precisely why we say we'd like to hear from some of the non-male people. If male people could please take a step back so that we can make sure that we're hearing from everyone. We all can do that. It's not just the practice in the party. As an instructor, I do that. I try to be very cognizant on which students I call on, and I try to make sure I'm calling on non-binary students, male identifying students, and women identifying students, so that everybody has a chance to hear everyone's voice. It just takes more cognizance. That's all it is. You just have to be more aware, which means decentering it is a regular thing that you'll start to practice, and then you'll get the hang of it. So if we're celebrating Pan-African Women's Day, and if we know that this institution has been around for 61 years, then let's pay homage to a particular party member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party who has given such an immense amount of energy, not only to Pan-African Women's Day, but to ensuring and maintaining the establishment of PAW within the AAPRP. And so, excuse me, we would turn and give homage to our comrade, Moana Koyate, who was a legendary member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. They were also a legendary member of the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. And there were two other organizations that our comrade Moana was a member of. And so we will talk about those in just a moment. But I first want to give you a little background on our comrade in terms of how they developed into the person they would be for the party. And so Comrade Moana was born in March of 1941 in Boston, Massachusetts. And Moana understood the importance of joining an organization early, you all. Early, this comrade understood that, which is why they became a member of the National Tenants' Rights Organization. So they were fighting on the lines in Boston as well as parts of New York, trying to make sure that tenants knew their rights, making sure that tenants had access to get help if their rights were being violated, trying to make sure that people had roofs over their heads, and if they were unjustly evicted, that they had resources and rights and opportunities to address those and to overturn those evictions. I mean, this comrade worked tirelessly trying to make sure that those things were taken care of. And the only way a person will be able to do something like that is by affecting people on a large number, which is why they joined an organization that was working for justice. That's why we encourage it. And we've already said you don't have to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, but we ask that you join some organization that is working for justice. I will put this note out here. Comrade Moana did not join the All African People's Revolutionary Party before they joined the National Tenants' Rights Organization. They actually joined the National Tenants' Rights Organization before they joined the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So again, you don't have to join the AAPRP. We never said that. We will continue to remind you that we never said you had to join our organization. We just asked you to join some organization that is working for justice. And the National Tenants' Rights Organization has continued to do so much instrumental work with helping people. You know, keep in mind that when you join an organization that's working for justice, you begin to engage with that organization more. Sometimes you might part ways because you start to realize that the ideology that the organization is practicing is simply not one that you can succumb to, and that's understandable. But the only way you would know that you're not agreeing with the ideology is if you engage with the organization. So just like you would take practicing oral care safely because you want to make sure that going to the dentist is a sufficient experience for you, you want to take being in an organization seriously, which means you got to do the work. Whatever your organization's criteria is, you're making sure that you do that assignment and that you show up and you're prepared and you're organized and you're on time and all of these things that will show people that you're serious, but more importantly, that'll show yourself that investing this kind of time in this organization's criteria is important to you because it's helping you develop yourself on a higher level. And so we got to think about that on a very large scale because Moana understood that. They understood that by joining an organization, you're engaging more, you're volunteering for assignments, you're contributing to them, you're following through. Moana was a great example of that. And experiencing more of the organization. The only way you can do that is by diving headfirst. And in doing that, then you start to learn more about the organization. You start to understand more why you are in solidarity and in support of that organization because of what they're doing, because of how they're navigating what's going on, because of how you are agreeing with what's happening. You would only know that based on what that organization is practicing. And the only way to know that is to be as active as you can with the organization. The other part about being active is if you're volunteering for assignments and if you're contributing and if you're following through with assignments, then that means you're going to start to take some leadership roles. You can't just be sitting back and just read for a work study every weekend. Like you got to sign up to facilitate a section of work study. You got to sign up to facilitate different sections of work study. Don't just volunteer to do the same section every time. Don't just volunteer to take the minutes. Those are important. Yes, they are. But it's also really important for you to facilitate the whole section. Or maybe you join a seminar and you volunteer to facilitate a seminar section next time. Like this is how you really get the experience. And it's vulnerable. Yes, it is. but it's also going to make you a stronger organizer and a stronger person for the people you're trying to advance forward, more importantly. So Moana took leadership roles within the organization and became the regional coordinator for that organization. This comrade served impoverished households from Boston all the way to Washington, D.C. So again, Moana joined the National Tenants Association, the National Tenants Right Organization. And then as the volunteerism grew, they took on more leadership and volunteered to have a role where they were considered the regional coordinator for the organization. And again, they affected households all the way from Boston to DC. So, I mean, it doesn't get any more clear than that. Obviously, this person cared about humanity and wanted to practice that as much as they could within the organization that they felt they could do that in. And so that's incredible. And we can think about that on a larger level. We can also think about how it wasn't enough to be a part of the tenants organization. Moana wanted to join another organization. So in 1973, Moana joined the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And because of that, Moana also became a member of the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, and again, courageously took on leadership roles and positions. Moana immediately took the leading role in organizing the party around the African women's emancipation, while she made New York City her organizing base of operations within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so, again, just taking on this idea of using the background, the timeline, and the crucial significance and purpose of Pan-African Women's Day, Moana was able to help the party in a way where we were able to set up a base camp in New York, where we were still helping with women's emancipation. So this is where, you know, you have situations where marginalized genders need to leave a certain situation because of a safety threat, because of a threat for the children. Maybe there are internal structural issues with the location this person lives in, and they need to be emancipated. But I know a majority of Moana's focus was not so much on the structural entities, but more so on the social entities, where you have people that are suffering from domestic violence situations and needing to be eradicated from that, removed from those situations as fast as possible. And so doing that work while being a member of the AAPRP, doing that work while being a member of the National Tenants Organization, that's dedication. Doing that work while being a member of the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, dedication, determination, and love for humanity. That's where that comes from. Moana became the second coordinator of the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. So again, they didn't just join the AAWRU, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, but they also took a leadership role. They became the second coordinator. I can't tell you how many times we have had a party-wide seminar and someone wasn't able to fill a role or a position, and I thought about jumping in the race, and I did, and it was nerve-wracking. We have comrades on the Zoom right now. I'm not going to call them out, but I know they have taken on roles and positions before, and it was probably nerve-wracking for them too. But I would also argue, I think for both of us, we probably were able to learn from it as well, because keep in mind, you're engaging with older cadre when you are on these party-wide seminars. And so they're able to share their knowledge and their wisdom with you, which is incredible because you literally have a front row seat to have key ways and tools to advance this organization, which means you're advancing the conditions of African people. You are literally making Africa stronger and better if you are in an African organization. If you're in another organization, hopefully, if it's an organization that works for justice, then you're advancing the conditions of your people and you're making the situation better for the people that you respectively identify with. And so, in whatever case or capacity, that's really important, because if you remain comfortable, and if you're comfortable because you don't speak up, if you're comfortable because you don't volunteer for leadership roles, if you're comfortable because you don't put yourself out there, then if that works for you, okay. But I would caution you to think about, how is you being comfortable going to change the conditions of humanity? How is you being comfortable going to change the conditions of the people that you are working to help? Because if you are comfortable now with Africans being shot down in the streets, then I don't really understand that. I don't understand how you could be comfortable with African women being raped at 3 to 4 times higher than other women, And yet rape kits are continuously being untested. I don't understand how you could be okay with African trans people being kidnapped and raped and killed. And we literally don't even know their names because we don't even know they were kidnapped. I'm not really sure how you're comfortable with that. But if you are uncomfortable, then that means you're taking risk and you're taking more chances because you understand that the current conditions that we live in, where African women can be raped and the rape kit simply goes untested for 90 days, which means the evidence becomes harder for us to measure and analyze. If you're uncomfortable with that, that's a good sign because that means you're going to be uncomfortable in other spaces, which is why you should volunteer and take on more responsibility as a leader role. This is why you should volunteer and put yourself out there more. This is why you should volunteer because you know that no trans person should be kidnapped, but certainly not an African trans person because their lives matter just less than a trans person who identifies of European descent. This means you understand that there are some serious contradictions, you all, and it is not okay that certain people are just simply not being treated fairly because of how they identify with their gender, because of how they identify with their sexuality, or because of the fact that they are born as African in this world, or born as a colonized person. That is simply not okay. Or born as a person who's poor and impoverished. So we just get to mistreat poor and impoverished people? Absolutely not. That is not okay. Again, if you are uncomfortable with those conditions, then that means you still have an ounce of humanity in you, and you need to use that. Use that. And if you use it, I promise you it'll help you grow. I promise you it'll help you grow. You know, my dad gives the example all the time about how for his born day, he doesn't like to do things to celebrate himself. He likes to do other things to celebrate humanity. So maybe he will, mentor some students and take them to a basketball game. Or he's been writing all these books, and all the proceeds to his books are going to advancing the struggle for the AAPRP. My thing about the Born Day is, to me, it's all about giving back. And that's what the teachings have come from my parents. And so, since I can remember, all of my birthday parties have been about me thinking about my guests and how I can honor them. So, literally putting thank you cards in every single gift bag that I gave to my guests, or making sure that I said something to thank every single one of them personally, a personal message verbally, that I would take the microphone and say, thank you, Pawpaw, for coming. I really appreciate you because of this, this, this. Thank you, Auntie so-and-so, for coming. I really appreciate you for this, this, this. Cousin Jojo, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you driving all the way down from wherever Cousin Jojo lived at that time. And so that's always been the institution that my parents have taught me with. And I've practiced that even to this day, even as a 30-something-year-old person. And it's very interesting to me because my recent birthday, my colleagues, I invited them to come out to dinner and they came, and I wanted some of them to have, a little thank you card. So I wrote them a thank you card, and they were like, you're giving me a thank you card on your birthday? And I'm thinking to myself, this is why we need more collectivism in the world, because yes, I am giving you a thank you card because you didn't have to come tonight. There's so many other things you could be doing tonight at 6 o'clock, and you're choosing to be here with me. Your time matters. And I appreciate that. So I want to acknowledge that. And then earlier, I wanted to treat them to some to a beverage at the coffee shop on campus. So I bought beverages. You're buying us beverages? Yes, because socialism is defined by thinking about other people, not centering yourself, and by understanding that if I can benefit from this beverage, then so can you, and so can you, and so can you. And that's how we can continue to have humanity, if we're thinking about other people, if we're practicing what it means to be considerate, to be kind, to be thoughtful. Those are the things that are going to keep us going. And if you practice those skills, considerate, kind, thoughtful, that's going to build in, and it's going to increase your ounce of humanity into a much larger substance, where pretty soon the humanity is going to be overtaking the individualism, and you're going to have less individualism and more humanity. But you're going to have to actively work on that because capitalism has taught you to be selfish and to think about yourself. This is why when I offered to buy the beverages at the coffee shop, the response I got was, why are you buying me a beverage on your birthday? Oh, I would never do that, because we're taught to be selfish. That's why. And so it makes perfect sense, right? When you really think about it. But this is why we have to continue to decenter the teachings of capitalism. As I said before, they have not gotten us anywhere. And so we go back to our comrade Moana and talking about how they became the second coordinator for the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. And, we continue to think about how that took place in 1985. And so, again, we had a seminar specifically targeting women's wings and marginalized gender wings. And so the AAWRU, or the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, is an opportunity within the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or the AAPRP, for us as party members to understand there's still a lot of work. Remember, social revolution, there's still a lot of work to be done where African women can still be asking and demanding that policies and conditions change so that we can still yield the respect that we deserve, where African marginalized genders can ask and demand for their respect to be deserved, because they still have a long way to go in terms of getting the treatment that they deserve. And so the wing within the party is established, and Moana took a leadership role as a second coordinator to help activate that more. I also want to note that it wasn't enough for them to be a member of the National Tennis Organization or the AAPRP or the AAWRU. Moana also contributed and co-founding the Women for Justice organization. And so, in addition to being members of an organization, this comrade co-founded an organization, which is why we say join an organization working for justice. And if you do not like any of the options that are available, then start an organization that is working for justice. You can call it whatever you want. You can get whoever you want to be a part and to help co-found it with you. You can decide that maybe you want to do something to address the shelterlessness in your community. You can establish an organization to do something about shelterless people not having shoes and socks. You can do something about children not reading on grade level. You can do something about children who don't have, who live in food insecure neighborhoods. You can do something about adults who live in food insecure neighborhoods. You can do something about adolescents who don't have after school activities anymore, which is why they are not really making a focus around adolescent students. And unfortunately, if they have idle time, then we know that that means that other activities will take place that cannot be good for their mental and physical development. And so your organization that you start can be about whatever you want it to be about. We just ask that you start it, and start it yesterday, because we need as much help as we can, you all. Everybody said that once Obama got in office that we weren't going to see any more killings. We still saw plenty of killings. Then people said when Joe Biden got into office, the shootings would stop. And whatever policy he promised to enforce with police officers and body cams, it would stop. We're still seeing those effects. We're still seeing the fact that it does not matter who's in office. I live in a city where it's 70% African, and there are Africans who are gunned down every single day. I also live in a city where not only is the percentage 70%, but there are people here who are in places of power, and they are African, and African people are still being killed. African people are still being evicted. African people have the worst health outcomes in the city I live in, but just in the South, period, and around the world. I just read an article yesterday. My dissertation is on maternal mortality, so I'm trying to get as many articles as I can to cite, but to also learn more about this. And my study is global, but I'll be collecting data on the US side. And so I'm looking at articles that are global just because I'm trying to get more information, even though I won't be collecting data per se. And I'm coming to the understanding that maternal mortality rates on the continent are just simply not talked about as much, because the focus is more on the babies and infant mortality rates, and those are not good either. And so thinking about both of those, I'm thinking, okay, this is really something that needs to be talked about more. Usually, we have more information and we can do something, but, it became very clear to me that there are some countries in Africa that have some of the worst maternal mortality outcomes in the world, and we just simply don't talk about it because either Africa is considered just one nation and it's just not doing well overall, or maybe the focus is still, from a white supremacy standpoint, on some of the European countries that have maternal mortality rates, even though the rates in Africa are simply that much worse. And so I bring this example up to say this. we have a lot of work to do, you all. And that's going to take every single one of us caring about the fact that we have African women and we have African marginalized people who are dying when they give birth to your next generation. That's the bottom line of that. And it affects every single one of us. This is not a African woman's problem. This is not a African marginalized gender problem. This is a humane problem. But if no one else cares, at least Africans should care. Because if no one is alive to carry and birth our next generation, then that means we're not existent, which means how in the world is Africa going to be free if we're not even around to fight for it anymore? I mean, we got to think about the future here. We can't just think about the current conditions and again, be selfish and central in thinking about our needs today. We need to think about the future. Think about what's to come. Think about who's going to carry on the torch. Who's going to make sure that Africa remains a socialist, unified continent after we achieve that? Who's going to maintain it? At some point, we're all going to die. That's just inevitable, especially if we live in capitalism. We can speed up the life process because we're going to die sooner because capitalism is the #1 killer, if you ask me. But some people say heart disease, but that's neither here nor there. You can get heart disease because of capitalism, but I'm going to get off my health communication soapbox now and talk more about Moana Koyate, okay? So just thinking about how this comrade was in organizations working for justice, but also co-founded an organization. Women's for Justice organization is really incredible because it was established after the police murder of Amadou Diallo in 1999. And the reason you should care about Women for Justice organization, because they are still established and existing today. They've actually changed their name. They are now the Women's Community Justice Association, and they exist in New York City. And the organization's purpose is to advocate for incarcerated African women. So we have so much focus around, why we need to address mass incarcerations and whatnot. And then we have Women's Community, Justice Association that is doing everything they can to fix that. They're doing everything they can, to make sure that African women are getting the help and support and the resources that we need. They're making sure that we have hopefully legal counsel and making sure that there are some spaces where we can at least be treated as humanely as possible, whatever that means, in this capitalist system. Moana was an AAPRP official delegate and representative for organizing, for being on the organizing committee for the historic 1995 Million Man March as well. And I just want to take a moment to honor how amazing must that be, because we have to think about how incredible was that this comrade was able to have a position on the organizing committee where they were able to be able to contribute to the Million Man March organization of the event taking place. You have to understand that there weren't other many Pan-Africanists who were on the organizing committee at that time in 1995. So that was really incredible. Not only that Moana took on the position, I'm pretty sure the other members were male identifying as well. So this is the only non-male person on the committee. And then this is a person who has a Pan-Africanist lens to help kind of shape and gear how the event should take place. I mean, just incredible. Not to mention was representing the AAPRP as well as the AAWRU. Moana took the role of bringing an organizer perspective with higher political education to the planning of the event. And then again, we can just think about and give praise to Moana because another intentionality goal that Moana set was in 1999, they wanted to help support bringing Fidel Castro to Harlem, New York. And that was able to be accomplished because of Moana's openly socialist perspectives, their AAPRP membership and AAWRU membership, and understanding why socialism is the key. So that allowed and fueled Moana to be on the co-lines and co-support with helping Fidel to come visit in Harlem, which was critical and incredible on so many different levels. And so, we just have to pay homage to this comrade because of all the work that they did. Again, remember their work with the national tenants, helping residents from Boston to New York, their work with the AAWRU and even with the AAPRP, co-founding the Women's for Justice organization that still exists to this day and helps African women who are incarcerated. I mean, just think about the legacy this comrade has made. I say legacy because they unfortunately passed away in September 2002 and died from cancer. But their legacy is ongoing. We still speak Moana Koyate's name. And it's important to also note, I'll say this, we have actually named an award after this comrade in the AAPRP. So every year at African Liberation Day, we have the awards ceremony section where we take, nominations early in advance about potential people who can win awards. We have a Kwame Ture Black Star Alliance Award, Black Star Award. I won't talk about that one today just because of time, but in addition to the KT Award, we also have the Daughters of Moana Koyate Award. And so this comrade obviously has earned an award to be named after them because of all the work that they've done, all the work that they've done for humanity and how they have put themselves on the line. I mean, I can't imagine being on the organizing planning committee for the Million Man March, such a historic event and such an event that was life-changing for so many of us, and still bringing a Pan-Africanist lens. I mean, that's just not common at that time and era, you all. That's like having an African name in 1995. Like, it was just very difficult to explain to people why you were doing that, what your intention was, and what your purpose was. And there's so much, Black rhetoric. There's so much Black power rhetoric. There's not enough African rhetoric. There's not enough African power rhetoric. And so just taking on this Pan-Africanist role with all other men, and you're the only non-male person there, which is a lot to think about, and then taking on this Pan-Africanist role to help the other committee members understand it's not just about Africans in the diaspora. It's not just about Africans in the US. We all have a legacy and a responsibility. I mean, that's just incredible beyond measure. And so Moana understood very clearly her final wish was to spend out the remainder of her life in the beloved Africa. And I just want to point this out. As you can see, Moana understood that we were kidnapped and that Africa was our home. This is yet another example of someone born somewhere outside of Africa, yet understood that where you're born does not make you who you are, but who you are is in you always. And if you are in fact kidnapped because you identify as African, then that means you are kidnapped and displaced. That does not mean that because Moana was born in Boston, they are American. That means that they are African and were kidnapped and dropped off in Boston by way of their ancestors, and maybe their family just never relocated back to the continent. It's really not that difficult, you all, but we're going to have to think more critically about that. And so as I prepare for the closing slide, I'll just say, Moana actually made their transition in Gambia. So they were already at home when they died. And from there, they just asked that their ashes be spread around the African ocean continent, coastal lines, so that they could be buried where many other AAPRP organizers have also come to visit. And so their final resting place was in fact at home on the continent. And I just think that that's critical. Again, they weren't born in Africa. But Moana understood that where you're born does not determine who you are. Who you are is knowing that if you are African, you belong to the African nation. Or if you are indigenous, you belong to the indigenous nation. If you are Asian, you belong to the Asian nation. If you are Palestinian, occupied Palestine is your land and you belong to the Palestinian nation. And so we thank you all so, so much for joining us today. I was a little off today because I usually do this with my dad. So I really appreciate you all's patience with me. I'm so sorry, my people on Zoom. I have not been able to look at any of your chats, but I'm going to try to zip through this slide real quick and hopefully be able to respond to some of these real quick. But I just thank you all so much for your patience. I'm hoping that the stream was able to work on YouTube as well as Facebook and Twitter. I followed everything carefully and it seemed like things were going okay. So hopefully everybody was able to hear me well. So please join us next week on Sunday, June 4th at 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be honoring and celebrating the ongoing solidarity relationships with Asians and Africans. I think that seminar, we've done it before, but it's time for another rotation of it because some Africans are still confused about the ongoing, that's why I said ongoing, the ongoing relationship that we have already established with Asian descent people and how we need to protect that. I also will encourage you to visit our website, www.aaprp-intl.org. If you are interested in viewing the virtual ALD broadcast, the African Liberation Day broadcast, you can find that there. If you are an African and you're interested in joining the party, you can visit the www.aaprp-int.org, .org website for that. Again, that's www.aaprp-intl.org website if you're interested in watching the ALD broadcast, or if you are an African and you're interested in joining the party. And then don't forget to download the Telegram app so that you can support Hood Communists. They have bi-monthly broadcasts, so make sure you support those. You can also support the AAPRP Pantula podcast, which takes place every Monday. We have the Forward Ever broadcast on Saturdays. They have the Revolutionary African Women podcast. I believe that you can access that on Spotify, if I'm not mistaken. We have the weekly AAPRP New Mexico newscast that takes place at 12 noon Mountain Time. And then we also have the Facebook page as well, facebook.com/AAPRP New Mexico. And then it has more details about that. If you all have not already purchased a guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence, please make sure you purchase the book. Again, that was written by my dad, and those proceeds go to the AAPRP, but they also go to local events. So the Sacramento is in the process of building a work study circle, and so they have events that are coming up. I know he's also used some of that money from the book to help print out the awards for African Liberation Day that I just mentioned to you, and being able to mail those awards, not locally, but internationally, because majority of our participants and awardees are on the continent, right? And so just being able to pay for those awards to get shipped internationally. And so please support these efforts by buying a guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. This book is also a nod as a secondary edition, if you will, to Kwame Nkrumah's book that I talked about at the beginning. And so the Revolutionary Warfare is critical because this guide for organizing defense is kind of an updated secondary version of that, if you will. So it'd be really cool if you could read the first book by Kwame Nkrumah and then pick this book up by Ajamu so that you can just get some more information on that. So it looks like I have 2 minutes left, you all. So I wanted to try to just read some of your comments. And thank you again, you all, for joining. I really appreciate everyone. Absolutely, Mark. All colonized struggles are connected. That is true. Greetings, and Pilo. Good to see you. So happy you're here. Awesome. Oh, good. Yeah, see, Mark is saying the ALD broadcast was great. Yes, I agree. You all missed it if you weren't able to go. Make sure you, well, you go if you're going in person, but also join live. You can watch the virtual of that. Definitely. Awesome. Yeah, Moana Koyate, a legendary legacy. Absolutely. Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. I'm so happy to hear that. That's true. That is very true. Okay, you all are awesome. I really appreciate you all. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Again, if you are not in an organization that's working for justice, now is the time, you all. Don't let them fool you. They are in the process of continuing to make our conditions really, really difficult. They're trying really hard to continue to dehumanize us as much as possible. That's why they're constantly teaching you that there's something wrong with you. And you have all these different opportunities for capitalism to be shoving information down your throat, reminding you that you need to buy this and you're not going to be sufficient until you have this. And do you have the right car? Do you have the right color skin? Do you have the right color teeth? Is your hair right? Do you have the house that you need? If you don't, people are going to laugh at you and make fun of you. Do you have food every week? If you don't, people are going to call you poor. Do your kids have nice clothes? Do your kids have holes in their clothes? I mean, there's all these different opportunities for us to think less about ourselves every single day, every single moment of every day. Opportunities for us to question who we are because we don't feel like we're enough, but we have to resist that. The best way to resist it is by joining an organization that is working for justice. I can tell you right now that I don't have all the answers, but I'm grateful that at least my work study group and the AAPRP has allowed me to get some clarity on what's going on and how I can be a better African person and affect the conditions for African people everywhere. And since I'm a part of an organization that is in fact based in Africa, I would say the AAPRP is doing a great job of changing the conditions for African people everywhere. So with that, I am going to close. It is the top of the hour, and I want to respect you all's time. Thank you so much. Again, you all be safe, take care, join an organization working for justice, and remember, victory is certain. Ashe. Thank you. Bye.